Greetings, all that watch my videos and those who don't watch my videos. Even though you'll never see this because you don't watch my videos, I still give you greetings because I am very gracious. Today we're going to be discussing Bill Maher and his recent monologue related to the LGBTQ XXIIP Elemento Z Tranzez community. But the thing is, before we get into this, I have to point out that the people covering this on my side of the political spectrum always get Bill Maher wrong. They always misread him. They report this as Bill Maher somehow moving to the right or Bill Maher having a political awakening when this is just not the case. Bill has always been this guy. And the reason I know this for a fact is because I have a memory that goes back further than 2 weeks. I've actually seen Bill Maher's show real time over the course of years because I like to actually have an understanding of the other side. I like to actually have an understanding of the people that I talk about on this channel, and I'm generally interested in political figures in this space and watching their stuff so again I can have an understanding of them. Bill Maher, way back when the CEO of Mozilla Firefox was being canceled for donating to the Prop 8 campaign, defended the Mozilla Firefox CEO. He actually coined the term at the time, the gay mafia.
What do you think of the Mozilla CEO having to step down over his donation to Proposition 8 group? Yeah, the Mozilla, which I'm wearing right now, by the way. I didn't know what Mozilla was. I saw it on my computer, but it's Firefox, right? It's the
yes,
browser.
Okay.
It's an STD. So this guy apparently does not want gay people to get married, and he had to step down. What do you think of that? The question is.
I guess he gave $1,000 8 years ago, and it's come back to haunt him.
Well, and he gave it when President Obama still was against gay marriage, so I don't think it's very fair.
Good point. Also, I think there is a gay mafia. I think if you cross them, you do get whacked. I really do.
To describe how the LGBTQ community goes after people who disagree with them and tries to get them fired from their jobs. They basically are wielding political power in a very aggressive way, and this is something that Bill Maher pointed out well before many of the online commentators that are doing videos on this started paying attention to politics, which according to many of them is when the earth started in terms of politics. So the idea that this is an awakening, the idea that he's moving to the right, the idea that this is a big change is ridiculous. Just because he was crazy on Trump, just because he's ultra aggressive on race issues, see my video where he excuses Whoopi Goldberg's ignorant take on the Holocaust with her being black and black people suffering from racial apartheid in America, therefore we can't expect them to be right. He has all of these things mixed up because he's an actual person, and people don't fit into boxes. They have dynamic sets of beliefs, they have impulses, they have things that don't necessarily go in straight down party lines with one side or the other. So we have to make that clear. You guys have to understand that. You have to point out two commentators who make this point that they're just wrong, and it's a bit ridiculous when they bring this up and when they talk about Maher in this way, because he's just not that guy. But before we get into this, before we deep dive into this topic, we're sponsored today by My Digital Money. Again, thank you to the sponsors that back this channel and make it happen. So we're going to go over to them, and then we'll come back on the other side to talk about this monologue. I'm sure many of you are aware that you could earn hundreds, if not thousands of dollars investing in crypto. But what you might not know is there's actually a way for you to earn money in the crypto space, but not pay capital gains tax. And the way to do that is to go over to mydigitalmoney.com and open yourself up a crypto Roth IRA. This is a tax deferred account, meaning that you guys pay the taxes on the assets up front, and when you get your gains all the way when it comes retirement time, that is all tax free. My Digital Money is also offering for members of my audience out there right now on the internet.com a $50 gift for any account that has $1,000 or more put into it and open with them. That's mydigitalmoney.com. Realize the gains of the crypto space without the tax penalties.
And finally, new rule: if something about the human race is changing at a previously unprecedented rate, we have to at least discuss it. Broken down over time, the LGBT population of America seems to be roughly doubling every generation. According to a recent Gallup poll, less than 1% of Americans born before 1946, that's Joe Biden's generation, identify that way. 2.6% of boomers do, 4.2% of Gen X, 10.5% of millennials, and 20.8% of Gen Z. Which means if we follow this trajectory, we will all be gay in 2054.
Now that's the opening of this monologue, where Bill Maher talks about how there's an ever-increasing amount of people that identify as in the LGBTQ community. And he makes a joke how by 2040, this is just going to be the entire population, because at the rates that we're going, it seems like more and more, because it's becoming more trendy, this appears to be happening. Now, some of this is definitely due to the fact that gayness and being a LGBT person is just more accepted overall, but a lot of this is due to the fact that it's trendy. Believe me, if you went to college within the last 10 years, you will have met a girl who is just a boring person who said that they were bisexual, even though all they did maximum was kiss a random girl when they were drunk at a party, and they do so for attention. And they'll have coming out parties, and when they do, you kind of have to prevent yourself from laughing because you know for a fact that this is just something they're doing to seem interesting. That's not to say that there aren't bisexual people out there. That's not to say that there aren't LGBTQ people out there, but it is to say that humans do respond to the environment that they're in, and a lot of people can come out to try to make themselves seem more interesting or more popular, and this is the trendy thing to do right now, so that's what we're seeing. And now it's not just somebody saying that they're bisexual, which has no real consequences for them on their physical form. It is people coming out and saying that they're trans or non-binary and doing so to their children, which is a big focus of Maher's segment.
I'm just saying that when things change this much, this fast, people are allowed to ask, what's up with that? All the babies are in the wrong bodies? Was there a mix-up at the plant, like with Captain Crunch's Oops, All Berries?
So one of the things I always appreciated about Bill is whether you disagree or agree with these monologues is his delivery is always stellar because he can boil down complicated topics and give you his perspective in an entertaining way. And this is a perfect example of this. The idea that everybody's non-binary or that everybody's a trans is ridiculous. This is a rare medical condition that throughout all of human history was around less than 1% of the population, and now we're hearing about all these babies being born in the wrong body, which should lead us to believe that maybe it's something external rather than internal for a huge chunk of these cases. And this is the theme that he keeps touching upon with evidence in this very entertaining monologue.
In the wake of America about to lose abortion rights, the ACLU recently tweeted a list of those who would be disproportionately harmed by this. You would think women might top that list? No, wasn't even on the list. Second on the list was LGBT. Really? Abortion rights affects gay and trans people more than, breeders?
Again, it's moments like this that show you why this monologue went viral. It's moments like this that show you why the left is so outraged by this. Because Bill isn't just talking about the medical issues with the trans children. He isn't just talking about the increase in LGBTQ XXIIP identification. He's talking about how everything in our society, all of our major institutions, are catering overwhelming to them. Abortion, our whole lives, was considered by the left to be a woman's issue. They would say, you're not pro-life, you're just anti-woman, and all that stuff. But Bill talks about how the ACLU put forward a list of the people most affected by abortion, and women didn't even make it because the idea of identifying a heterosexual woman as a victim group or anybody heterosexual is so repugnant to the lefties nowadays that they can't even function. You can't even talk about abortion rights, which is what the left considers abortion to be, a right of women, in terms of rights related to women. It's absurd in every possible way, and of course, the LGBTQ are somehow the most affected by this, even though the gays aren't having sex in a way that produces children. The transes, a lot of them get sterilized, and again, the trans men, which are female to male transes, that get pregnant are even more minuscule than the transes population overall, but somehow they're the most affected by this. By the way, they all tend to congregate in very left-wing cities where abortion is likely to be legal. Even if they're not born there, they tend to move there over time. And as Bill Maher points out, a lot of the transes outbreaks are happening in lefty areas because it's being pushed societally on these people. So if you are actually going to break it down, crunch the numbers, do the maths, it's less likely to affect LGBT people than women by the percentages.
I'm happy for LGBT folks that we now live in an age where they can live their authentic lives openly. And we should always be mindful of respecting and protecting. But someone needs to say it. Not everything's about you.
Honestly, people in America need to hear this way more often, and it's not just exclusively the LGBTQ, XXIIP, JJXYZK community. It's everybody. Just like when we're talking about a random issue and race gets injected into it, people need to look at the person bringing up race and say, look, it's not about you. It's not about race. Stop trying to distract from the issue with your own personal issue. And by the way, one of the reasons why the left and these gay groups are so angry at this video is because of this statement in particular, because they think everything's about them. The reason that there's so many people who aren't really LGBTQ XXIIP are identifying this way is because they want attention. So Bill Maher is saying, no, you don't get attention.
And it's okay to ask questions about something that's very new and involves children. The answer can't always be that anyone from a marginalized community is automatically right. Trump card might drop, end of discussion. Because we're literally experimenting on children.
The idea that just because you're marginalized, you're right is nonsense, and we're going to call you out on it. We're going to point this out because that's absurd. Your innate characteristics are things that don't matter, and that's how they should be treated. They're not the most defining thing about you that everybody should cater to.
Maybe that's why Sweden and Finland have stopped giving puberty blockers to kids. Because we just don't know much about the long-term effects. Although common sense should tell you that when you reverse the course of raging hormones, there's going to be problems. We do know it hinders the development of bone density, which is kind of important if you like having a skeleton. Fertility and the ability to have an orgasm seem also to be affected. This isn't just a lifestyle decision, it's medical. Weighing trade-offs is not bigotry.
Again, the reason why this video is going viral is not because Bill Maher is hateful. If you listen to what he's actually saying, GLAAD and all these organizations that are getting mad at him, Bill Maher is coming from a place of love and care for the LGBT community. He's not coming from a place of hate. On top of that, Bill Maher's not even coming from a Republican position. The reason why he's doing this is because he doesn't want the left to lose based on the crazies that are driving this insane gender ideology into absolutely everything. And everything that he's saying in this video is total common sense. It's totally sensible, especially, again, when you're talking about children. I'm super libertarian. If the whole Tranzez thing turns out to be harmful for adults and adults still want to do it, I'm not against them being able to do it because you own your own body and you're allowed to wreck your own body as an adult. But as a kid, you can't do that. As a parent, you can't do that to your kid. And pointing out that not very conservative countries, not super religious countries, like in the European Union, like Scandinavian countries, are banning the puberty blockers for children due to negative side effects, due to concern, due to ethical concerns about experimenting on children, should be something that is brought to the table and should be talked about in a reasonable way, and not just have people on the left scream about Tranzez suicide at you as if that's an argument. It's a substitute for an argument, it's an emotional appeal, and it's meant to quiet a discussion rather than forward a discussion on what is the best possible care for the people that are going through this.
Yes, part of the rise in LGBT numbers is from people feeling free enough to tell it to a pollster, and that's all to the good. But some of it is, it's trendy. Penis equals man? Okay, boomer. Remember, the prime directive of every teen is anything to shock and challenge the squares who brought you up. It's why nobody gets a nose ring at 56.
Again, nailed it right there on the head. Makes perfect sense, logical, reasonable, and sensible, so you understand why people on the left are against it. And I know this video might be getting a little bit boring. I know this video isn't that interesting because I'm just agreeing with Bill Maher, but when you're correct, when you're on point, you're going to get agreement with me no matter how much I disagree with you on other issues. A lot of people put Bill in a box because he's super anti-Trump, but again, craziness about Trump does not necessarily mean you are crazy 100% of the time. When somebody is saying the correct things, when somebody is pushing a good message, a reasonable message, no matter where they are on the political spectrum, it is sensible to agree with them. It is sensible to signal boost them. It is sensible to explain further where they're getting their ideas and how accurate they actually are. We should not let our opinions of people based on a couple of things turn them into cartoon villains. Maher is not a cartoon villain. He's somebody that makes sense from time to time, and this is one of those situations. We're talking about medical medical decisions involving children. Of course, we should be able to discuss the trade-offs. Of course, we should proceed with caution. Of course, we should side on them being able to go through their natural puberty before we just start experimenting with them and say, well, the consequences don't matter because what about them Tranzez suicide rates, and puberty blockers, no big deal. They could just be reversed. Just stop taking puberty blockers. It's no problem. They use it as a treatment for 8-year-olds that go through puberty, so therefore it's acceptable and passable in all different scenarios.
Gender fluid. Kids are fluid about everything. If kids knew what they wanted to be at age 8, the world would be filled with cowboys and princesses. I wanted to be a pirate. Thank God nobody took me seriously and scheduled me for eye removal and peg leg surgery.
Now, I'm going to link the rest of the monologue in full in the description of this video. I already got into an entanglement with TMZ, which is owned by Warner Brothers, and HBO is also owned by Warner Brothers. And thankfully, TMZ didn't file that lawsuit against me. They decided not to take me to court, which is great news for me and this channel, and for that video, which is back up on the internet for your viewing pleasure. So you guys can go watch the full monologue. Highly recommended. He talks about activists at the ACLU trying to ban books. He talks about other ways people are trying to silence people on the correct side of this issue. He even talks about doctors that are trans themselves that are warning and raising red flags about how this is clearly becoming a social contagion and it's becoming a huge problem. But I do want to play one more aspect of this that I think is incredibly important, and it's something for you guys to take with you and think about anytime we're discussing these issues, because again, we're talking about what happens with children, and we're talking about a lot of invasive medical procedures and medical experimentation, just shooting our shot in the dark here when it comes to very young children.
If you attend a small dinner party of typically very liberal, upper-income Angelenos, it is not uncommon to hear parents who each have a trans kid having a conversation about that. What are the odds of that happening in Youngstown, Ohio? If this spike in trans children is all natural, why is it regional? Either Ohio is shaming them or California is creating them.
Look, whatever your opinions are on Tranzez, honestly, it's not really relevant. We can all at least acknowledge that the people actually going through gender dysphoria, the people who transition, are a small minority, a small group of people. So the idea that you'd have these clusters, and all of these clusters would seem to be around super progressive people that have children and would earn social credit for transitioning their children, and Bill Maher can observe them all at one party, is a bit odd. And the idea that we see that in Los Angeles and San Francisco and New York City and all these other places, but we don't see it that spread out in places like Dayton, Ohio, or in the Midwest where this isn't trendy, where this is more odd, should be alarming. We saw that study, I think it was from Brown University, about how having one Tranzez person in a group creates a social contagion and ultimately ends up leaving to entire clusters of people identifying this way, because this is what kids do. This is like the new goth for a lot of kids. It is definitely an attention grab, and the idea that it causes suffering and that the medical procedures are invasive and no person would want to go through that just for attention is absurd in every possible way. Kids do things to themselves that have permanent damage all the time because they're not thinking about long-term consequences, because their brains aren't even fully developed. They're not even halfway developed at the time that a lot of these kids are coming out and saying that they're transes and being rewarded for it by society, by the school, by their friend group, and by their parents. This is why this is something that we need to look into. This is why this is something that we need to be able to talk about. This is why you need to be able to look into the face of these Tranzez activists, of these organizations that seek to bully you into science and say, no, not on my watch. I'm going to defend the kids, and I'm not going to let you do this to my children. And the idea that it has become outrageous that in schools that they have to notify the parents that if their kid is identifying as a trans just shows you how crazy our system is actually becoming. Because if your kid had depression, if your kid had anything affecting them that increased their risk of suicide, and the school did not inform the parents, and the kid ultimately ended up committing suicide, they would be sued into the ground, and rightfully so. But the idea that being a trans is something that has a much higher suicide rate than depression and any of these other conditions is something that is an identity and it's protected, and the school can't tell the parents, and that kid ultimately ends up committing suicide, and it's just like, well, sad day for you. Me, the counselor who sees the kid for a couple hours a week, decided that it was not within the purview of the parent to know about this, therefore, no big deal, is absurd. Unfortunately, that is the way that this works in some parts of this country, even though it's not the way that any of this should work. So I do credit Bill Maher for pointing this out. I condemn all of the people who are not smart enough to realize that Bill Maher has been on this train. He's been warning about the excesses of the lefts for over a decade. And again, this isn't a right-wing perspective. He wants the Democrats to stop getting bogged down in these divisive issues that hurt them ultimately, because he wants success for the Democratic Party. Remember, this is the guy who very publicly gave $1 million to a Barack Obama super PAC to show you what team that he's on. He hasn't changed his position. The lefties have just gotten more crazy around him, and they're trying to sell him down the river because he dared speak out against the holiest group of all, the Tranzez, and not to mention the Tranzez children. How dare he, Bill? Let's condemn him. That's where the left is, but Bill Maher is in the same exact place, still on the left. So just acknowledge the reality that people are more complicated than the memes or the worst clip you ever saw of them. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, you can show them by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. You can follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about Bill Maher standing up to the gay mafia, as he calls it. Till next time.